The federal government alone spends $4.5 billion a year locking up people for drug offenses. It costs almost $28,000 a year just to incarcerate one prisoner. Compare that to the average annual tuition at a 4-year public college, which is $5,491, and you realize that the drug war is blurring our nation's priorities. Taxpayers' money would be much better spent educating people instead of punishing them. But thanks to ever-increasing mandatory minimum drug sentences, an entire class of young people are being filtered into new supermax prisons, while the resulting budget crunch forces the rest of us to go to old, dilapidated schools. The more money we dump into prisons, the less we have to invest in college campuses. Visit www.schoolsnotprisons.com to find out how you can get involved in the war against the war on drugs.
Mostly going into our pharmacies and making it themselves?
Years ago, the big concern was meth was coming across the country. In about 1995 or 6, we had some guys from Missouri come and do some training for us, and they had documented, I mean, it was just coming eastward in some states like Iowa, Missouri. I mean, it really was a huge problem for them. Never really got here. And one of the reasons is the manufacture of it creates bad odors and explosions. And in an urban area where people are kind of living on top of each other, it came to people's attention. In more rural areas, it was easier for them to get away with.
So
The tactic of controlling the pseudoephedrine, like making you sign for this stuff when you get it, initially had an impact on the meth problem. Started down until people discovered, well, I can't get enough myself, so I just recruit him, her, and him to go buy me some, and they become Smurfs in the terminology. And it's become kind of a big business to do that. I think that whole process of making meth has been replaced by super labs in Mexico now that just
so you don't think
you don't make it your own.
But I thought in Mexico, and maybe I'm wrong, I thought it was a lower problem in Mexico now because they made pseudoephedrine completely illegal.
They've come up with an alternative chemical.
Oh, they have.
Yeah. So the meth problem, to my knowledge, took sort of a bit of a decline and is now coming back.
So to go back, you don't think it's more of like a local issue targeting meth labs, but it's coming over the border now and it's like an out-of-state issue? Sort of?
Both California, there's been discovery of super labs in California, Mexican super labs, and the chemistry on this stuff is not complicated. I mean, we take out one precursor chemical, somebody will come up with something else.
I just wanted to comment on that. I'm from a very rural part of Idaho, and meth is a huge local problem there. I mean, we have explosions on like a monthly basis. They're busting meth labs constantly in those little towns. You know, people get in there, you know, a lot of trailer parks, a lot of places like that where it's very secluded and nobody's in there checking on them.
And these things are basically toxic waste dumps. I know any that we go to, if we know there's a meth lab, people put them in the back of a pickup and drive around town while it's cooking. If you come to any one of these campers or trailer, whatever, that's a toxic waste site, and if you get in there, you're putting yourself in real danger. But that becomes an EPA problem to clean that up, and it's hugely expensive. So, yeah, and these meth folks are a different breed. We all thought that was going to come to Cincinnati, and it really hasn't. There's been a few episodes, but not much. Sir?
I might want to say this question for the end, but what would you recommend the takeaway is for the participants here? Is what can they do? What would you recommend doing? What would how do you have them get engaged in actually bringing this about?
Well, people are already involved in SSDP, and I think again I've been kind of impressed with their organization. They've got a nice staff in Washington. You guys have some targeted stuff that you do, and I'd encourage all of you to join LEAP and watch for legislation that comes up. Every year, the last 3 or 4 years, Ohio has put in a bill for medical marijuana. And again, I'm not a big fan of that, but I see it as a transitory step So, if you want to get behind that, would be one thing. And I think we need to educate people, and starting with your friends, the people on campus, parents. It's going to be a long process. We've already been 40 years in this thing, so it's not going to happen overnight. Yeah.
Do you have any idea of, because when I was younger, I remember I was in DARE, and that was probably the biggest thing was when I grew up, I realized that marijuana.
Where there were speakers about cocaine. And at each of those conferences, the main speaker told this story. And the story is they were doing some rat research, and it was behavioral research for these rats. And what they would do, train the rats to press on a bar, and they'd get a pellet of food. And once they learn that, then you stop the food and watch how many times they will continue to press until the behavior is extinguished, is what they call it. So here's the story. They get these rats hooked on food, cut off the food, and then count how many hits of the bar they do before they give up. And the report was the rats continue to press the bar 150 times before they give up. Now they gave the rats sexual orgasms. And teach them, press the bar, get an orgasm, and then cut them off. And then count to see how many times. And what do you think? According to the speaker, says these rats would quit after 500 hits. Which I'm thinking, I know people who try harder than that. So the next part of the research is they've got these rats hooked up and they give them a little hit of cocaine. So they learn the cocaine, stop the cocaine, and then count how many times they continue to press the bar. What do you think they said?
Killed them.
1,500 times before the rats would give up on the cocaine. What's the message there? That this stuff is more pleasurable than sex. And I didn't say anything, and I'm sure half the audience is thinking, "Wow, where can I find some of this?" I was talking to a friend of mine a couple months later, an animal researcher, and I relayed this story to him, and he says, "I hate to disillusion you, but rats don't really have orgasms." But the belief, all of us up there, we believe so much in the power of this stuff that we were struck dumb. We bought it. Drugs. And let me tell you one other short thing here. The Free Clinic actually did this in San Francisco, did this research. What happened to my... And the research was...
It's over here.
Behind the projector.
The research was, what's the impact? Does marijuana enhance people's sexual activity? And so they started asking people, brought them in. What, when you have marijuana and sex, how does it influence you? And here's 5% of people says, marijuana makes it better for me. 5% of people said, no, actually I find it really kind of takes away from things. And the rest of the people kind of fell in here. What do you call that? Yeah, the bell curve. If we ask people almost any question, how do the results fall? On a bell curve. So if we ask those same people, how about classical music when you have sex? 5% would say, 5% would say, it's nonsense. So I hate to disillusion everybody that, was planning on a little marijuana episode. Sorry.
When we were talking about DARE and how that was big back then, another thing that some high schools are doing are teen council. High school, teen counseling, they have high schoolers go talk to middle schoolers. This is something they do at Madeira. And in Madeira, we need 40 hours of community service to graduate from high school. And if you do a year of teen counseling, you get 120 hours of community service. Something like, 1 year, I got 3 times what I need. So in 11th grade, I went, and at this point, I'd never even been around drugs or knew anything about them at all. So I went, and me and a whole bunch of people who were all in the same boats, we knew nothing about drugs. We all were going and telling kids stuff about why they shouldn't do drugs, and we had no idea. We were just 17, 18, and it was we had it was all this stuff we looked up on the internet. We didn't even really know anything. That's why it was kind of the blind leading the blind,
pretty good description.
Well, and they actually, I've seen where they actually use it as a punishment, where if you get busted for drugs, then you're supposed to go and like, you know, and tell people, oh, well, you shouldn't do it. I mean, they've even done it with famous people. Like, I remember when Snoop got busted, and they're like, well, you need to go out and do like commercials promoting. Yeah, like it's just.
Oh, yeah.
You know, here's the deal, and there's been some research done on this kind of thing, where we have somebody who has some sort of horrendous history, and as part of their rehabilitation, we put them in front of some groups. The problem is, despite what they say, they're there as a survivor. I did it and got away with it. And that's the message that research says, that's the message kids take away. Is that, you know, despite what you say, you know, hey, it sounds pretty good.
Sounds like you stopped because you got busted.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had a hell of a time doing it. So, yeah, a lot of these drug prevention, there's a new generation of drug prevention beyond DARE and some of these others that have much more of a sound clinical basis, and we ought to be doing more of that. Because, you know, if you're a drug dealer and your customers, you're a customer, you're an addict, what are the 3 life paths for addicts? There's only 3 of them. You either quit, you end up in jail, or you die. Okay? So all 3 of those are bad for the drug market. So they constantly are trying to recruit new customers. There's just a story out of Kansas that some dealers there, meth dealers, were adding strawberry quick to their concoction because, hey, strawberry quick, look at this stuff, it's pink, how can it hurt you? You know, so they're not going to sit back. They're very aggressive in recruiting kids. Sir?
Fraction of the violence in society that you hear about, the various gun, would you estimate with the drug trade?
Well, I kind of agree with our former coroner. I'm blocking on his name, tell me.
He's now Cincinnati State's.
Yeah. Anyway, very impressive guy. He says that 90% of the Cincinnati homicides were drug-related.
Drug-related or drug trade-related?
Drug-related, which drug trade is a little bit of a subset of that, and I'm not sure anybody really knows, but I can tell you so much of this is retaliation, you know, people trying to steal the drugs. You know, we had, you know, I'm on a wire inside a van, and we've got officers, undercover officers buying drugs, and, you know, they're buying from one guy, another guy comes up with a gun, you know, these are my customers. You know, this is dangerous, dangerous crap, so high percentage. Yes, sir.
So that's why we always see like First 48 and new shows Cincinnati police officer women. Majority of those crimes, that's in like First 48 is like drug related in Cincinnati.
Yeah. What's your question?
I'm just saying. I mean, I was saying it makes sense because most of the crimes that you see on like the First 48.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so much of it's. You know, we had a gang in Cincinnati whose specialty was, I'd buy a whole bunch of drugs from you and give you a bunch of cash, and later that night we'd go to your house, do a home invasion, and take it back. And we'd pull it the next day with somebody else. I mean, these home invasions are almost entirely drug-related because once word gets out that you've got some drugs, you've just taken a delivery, as the word spreads around the street, you become a prime victim. Because who are you going to call? You call the cops. And these people are in business because of their willingness and ability to use violence. So, you know, you get involved with them, it's really a major safety risk. Yes, sir. Should we make it the last one?
We've got plenty of time, so it's up to
Okay.
you.
I'm here till you guys are charged.
We have the room till 7, so, so what would be the implications, like, say you actually do go to a legalization system, would all the people that have these crimes, like, I don't know, like with prohibition what happened, but will that stuff still follow them if they change the rules like it does now? Because, like, I know, for example, I got a pot ticket when I was 19, and, like, 6 years later I went to go apply for a apartment, and I got denied because of upon taking from, like 6 years ago?
That's a great question, and I don't really know the answer. I would assume that there would be some change in that. Most of those kind of policies were written as part of the real, Reagan area, crackdown on drugs, and as we move to hopefully a more sensible policy in the fairly near future, those things will be revisited and fixed. No guarantee.
Obama did mention something about reforming the entire government. He said it hadn't been done, what was his last?
Oh, that reorganizing, yeah.
So, just to recap a little bit, you said that it's probably best to legalize marijuana, and then for the other drugs, you're talking about decriminalizing, making it a civil issue and a public health issue.
Yes.
And then in terms of that, you were saying that we need to increase treatment and, do you want to expand on that at all? Or just because I know that that's the central core of this conversation. And we've had a lot of questions going around, so.
Yeah, it is. And I would do whatever it takes to get these people into treatment. One of the things, and I worked in drug treatment, and we had rules about who got into the program. I would have some drug treatment programs that had basically no rules. I mean, let's get you in, because every day we got a hold on you in treatment. That's a day you're out of the drug market. So we need to view this as a fight for the hearts and minds of these people. So low threshold programs is what they're referred to. Heroin is a little bit different. We have no antagonistic drugs for crack cocaine and methamphetamine. But heroin, in England, they now give medical heroin at clinics. And the results are much better than methadone, that people will stay in treatment longer.
They're doing it in Canada now, too?
In Canada, great. So any way we can come up with to keep these people out of the drug market, I'm 100% for it. Sorry.
Had any interaction with the folks like Talbert House, what their viewpoints are?
No, I really don't. I mean, I know a lot of those folks, and I'm not sure what the interview would be. I did give a talk to the House of Hope in Columbus to their 100th birthday, which is a rehab facility. A large one up there, and I got nothing but positive comments from people afterwards, so staff.
Since you worked in the rehab industry, why have they set up barriers to getting into rehab? Because like a lot of people who may want to get in, you can't get in unless you get busted because it's really expensive to go on your own. Like why do we have these? What are we going to have?
Supply and demand. There's a waiting list at most of the programs in my experience. So, and also there's the therapeutic idea that we'll have better success if we raise the bar a little bit to get in, and that's something that for funding sources and other places becomes important. If we're going to have low threshold programs, we're not going to have as much success, but we're going to get people that we wouldn't normally get. And the success of this stuff is unbelievable. I mean, I talked about these women from off the streets, and I always think about this one woman. When I was at Captain Advice, we got letters from citizens in Over the Rhine about this woman who was she has AIDS. She was out prostituting herself on a daily basis in abandoned buildings, and so I knew her face, I knew her name, and she got into the program, and I saw her as a volunteer down there. The most articulate, bright woman,